herself. I won't. Okay, supporting the female candidates here.
All right, so hi everyone. This is Ashna Chaudhary, UPSC CSE 2022 All India Rank 116. So today I will start my session here. I really, please spare me, please forgive me if I commit some mistakes during the session, because I haven't really decided on the flow with which I will be going. So it will be a free flow conversation with you all. If you feel at any point that you need to ask a question, you can always raise your hand and interrupt me in between, because the motive of this session is for you to benefit out of it. So feel free to ask any question, and you can always stop me in between, interrupt me in between. If you want me to change the medium to Hindi, you can always ask me for that. If I am speaking continuously in Hindi and you want me to change the medium to English, you can also ask me for that. So, all right, shall we start? Okay, perfect. So all I have in my diary is I'm just pretending to look prepared. I have nothing here, just the source list. So that is where I'll start with. So talking about the source list, have you guys read the syllabus yet? I've been told that you would be sitting for the 2024 examination. So have you read the syllabus? Really? All right, great. How many times? Yeah. More than 5 times. All right. That's great. I mean, this guy has done a great job, because syllabus is the key. So that is where you know how to delimit the vast curriculum that you have in the UPSC examination. So it is so vast that people get intimidated right in the beginning of the preparation, whether to go ahead or not. So the key to delimit your preparation is to read the syllabus. And reading does not mean just skimming through it, because UPSC has given a very wide syllabus. It's you have to go through pages and pages, and the reason has not been to fill in pages. There has been a reason that they have given in such a wide syllabus, and you should always begin with that. So syllabus reading, syllabus understanding, that is the key to starting your preparation. And not only reading the syllabus and rereading the syllabus, but you also need to classify the syllabus according to your needs. So if, for example, I would give an example from anthropology. Are there students from anthropology here? Oh, okay, there are many, yeah. I'm really sorry for others, but it's just an example, and I hope using that case example, you guys would understand. So there are various, in anthropology, if you have seen the syllabus, it goes like introduction. After that, you have socio-cultural anthropology. Then you have in between some chapters of biological anthropology. Then goes archaeology. Archaeology is divided into 2 papers, paper 1 and paper 2. And that's how the disjunction occurs between archaeology. So for your ease of understanding, what you can do is you can merge archaeology of paper 1 and paper 2 into one and understand archaeology thoroughly, right? So that is classification. When I say classification, I mean that. In your syllabus, these things are disjuncted, kept in silos, but you do not need to keep them in silos. You can integrate them as per your needs. Biological anthropology, there are some chapters, there are some sections in part 1 of the syllabus, 1.6 to 1.9, I guess. And then it reappears again in unit 9. So rather than studying 1.6 to 1.9 in the beginning, what you can do is you can straight away bring in unit 9 as well while you are doing biological anthropology. So rather than the units that have been given in a defined manner in the syllabus, what you can do is you can classify them according to the themes. The themes in anthropology being socio-cultural anthropology, biological anthropology, archaeology, Indian tribal. So in that manner, you can always find out themes, a thematic classification or a temporal classification. In case of a subject like history, you would need to go with the temporal classification. So the idea is to simplify everything. So if you study everything as it is given to you, that might be the convenient way for the person who has written a book, but not for you who's trying to understand the book. So that is why you need to understand everything according to your needs here. So the first step is to make things simple for yourself. For that, I think the other thing would be to keep a very minimal source list. Do not run after books. Do not, read like 4 or 5 books for one subject. That would be a very, I would say, a rigorous exercise for you academically and mentally. That might stimulate you as well, intellectually as well. But in this exam, you have limited time. So you would want to keep it limited to what is needed. So the key to clearing this exam is not to read everything under the sun, but to limit it and read only what is required. So you should not only know what to read, but also what not to read, right? So that is that is a broad overview that I have given. Now coming to the syllabus part of it, there are 4 papers, general studies papers, GS1, GS2, GS3 and GS4. GS1 comprises of, very good, GS2, polity, governance and IR, and social issues, yeah. Then you have GS3, which is internal security, environment and ecology, and GS4 is your ethics. All right, perfect. So this is how you, if you already know your what comprises your GS1, GS2, GS3 and GS4, that is the way to go about with everything. In terms of your current affairs preparation as well, you would not read the newspaper in a free flow. What you would do is, you would classify the information that you get. For instance, the Indian Express newspaper, there is a particular column dedicated to the ideas of C. Rajamohan, which is called Mandala, Raja Mandala, which is called Raja Mandala, and by its very nature, it falls into which category? Very good. Yeah, IR portion of GS2. So what you do is, you do not just read it, but you make short notes out of it, crisp notes out of it, and you put them under which head? GS2 IR. So that is what you can begin with. You can always keep different registers for different subjects, or you can take one register for GS1 entirely and then decide certain portions of the register for geography, certain portions for history, and the other ones for and the other rest remaining for your society. So that's how you can always do, and whatever you see in your newspaper and you feel that this is something that you need to note down, so do not just note down under the broad head of current affairs, but note it down under the particular head that you have chosen for yourself, right? So that is a beginning in classification exercise. All right, so this is one thing which is very important, and that would help you in your revision as well. So you are not studying like, you're not revising your current affairs like, I have seen what is Saptamatrikas here, for instance, which belongs to the history domain, and then immediately after that you are studying national monetization policy, which falls into the governance domain. So what you have done is, you are reading everything about history at one place, whatever is in current affairs, and everything about international relations in one place. So that is the first step you need to do. So you need to understand where the information is coming from, where it should be kept. So putting information under the right head is the way to start it. That would really help you in revising it later on. Then how frequent the revision should be is another question. How many revisions do you need before appearing for the exam, and how frequently they should be done? So you would need at least 4 revisions before you appear for the real exam um, for the D-Day. So you would at least need 4 revisions. I mean, I needed them. So yeah. And what should be the frequency of you revising? So current affairs, you can always revise in maybe like uh, 2 months along with your monthly thing. So I would, do not worry, I would also share you my sources of current affairs and how I comprehensively prepared for current affairs, because we have seen even in mains the questions are mostly related to current affairs. If you have seen previous year questions of current affair of mains, you would realize that the questions are not directly asked as to what is this, but in light of the current event of this, how would you justify this phenomena? So always the questions are related to the current event. So why do you think UPSC does that? Because they are actually asking you to merge the current with the static. So it is an integrated exercise that the UPSC expects you to do. So they are not asking you to, for say, right, I mean, there could be a question which is as simple as, how would you manage a disaster that breaks out due to earthquake? Or there can be a question that an earthquake was witnessed in this area of Delhi, which originated in Afghanistan, recently happened, right? So in the light of this statement, how do you think we can do better in the management of earthquake? So understand the difference between the two questions. They might be seemingly, it might appear to you that they are asking the same thing out of you, but they are not. In the language that has gone into framing the question, they are actually giving a hint of as to how to answer those questions. So if they have put in current event, then they are expecting you to actually mention something out of that as well. So what you can do is you can always begin your answer with the current data points. And how do you get your current data points? You get them out of newspapers or out of your monthly magazines. So that is why I'm saying that current affairs are something you just cannot divorce from your preparation. So you cannot keep your preparation static oriented, because if you begin with what is an earthquake in this question, if you begin by answering that, that was never a question. The question was earthquake management in the light of current events. So you need to mention something about the current event. And if they have already mentioned the current event in the question, it limits your chances, because now you cannot mention that event. So what do you have in hand? You have the data point in hand to show the examiner or the evaluator that you have actually understood the question. You have actually tried to answer the question, keeping in mind the current event. So that is why your current affairs preparation becomes very important. Now, how to prepare for current affairs? In order to prepare for current affairs, I can share with you my strategy, which has been very comprehensive, and people have told me this, that it is very difficult to follow the same. But I would share it with you along with the time I used to give to every component. So my day would always start with a newspaper. I would read the news, I would leave the news which was not very relevant. If there is a news item which comprises of names and personal items, you can always skip that. And if it caters to certain broad strategy, you can always pick that up. So when you are reading the newspaper, classify it, as I've already told you, under the heads as to where the information belongs. Make short note about it, crisp, very, very crisp. For instance, if you're talking about, say, national monetization pipeline, and you see, okay, which ministry is doing it, you can always mention that. What is the allocation? It's approximately 6 lakh crores, if I'm not wrong. So you can always write that, right? So that is all you need to write. You do not write down the entire editorial. You just write pointers and maybe 2 or 3 sentences. You end it. So that's how you begin with your newspaper, which should take you about 30 to 35 minutes, not more than that. Knowing what is to be read and what is not to be read. Followed by newspapers, you can always go with, so you have a coach, so do you have access to the daily portal of the coaching? Yes, so they must be sharing daily news items, right? How many news items do they share daily with you? All right, it's a video form. Is it? It's in textual form. So, all right, all right. So, do you have different news items in that which you can count? All right. So, how much would it be? Roughly 10, 12, sometimes 7 to 8, right? So, all you can do is you need to take out like 10 minutes of your day. You need to go through them. If the heading is such that you've already read it in the newspaper, you can always skip that news. But if there is something which you haven't read in your newspaper, which did not come in your newspaper, but maybe the other newspaper which you are not referring to, you can always look it up and maybe include that in your notes as well. So daily notes are done. Apart from that, what I used to do, again, it would take about like 15 minutes of my time, would attempt, there is a free test at Unacademy, it's called T20 test. So it's a daily current affairs test. There are 20 questions daily. And those questions you can try to attempt. Do not be disheartened if you're not able to answer all those questions right. There can be a time wherein you get all the questions wrong. But what should be your strategy to identify the questions that have gone wrong? And just because you haven't seen them anywhere, and to put them in your notes as well. So by this time you have spared like 30 minutes for your newspaper, 10-15 minutes for your daily portal. So it's like 45 minutes by now, and 15 minutes for your T20 test. So it goes to about 1 hour. Right? So you can spare 1 hour every day for current affairs. It's not very difficult to follow. I would strongly suggest that if you are giving like 7 to 8 hours of your day to the static portion, you should give at least 1 hour to your current affairs, which comprise 3 sources. But when you revise it, it's just your notes. It's just your notes, and anything that is excluded out of your newspaper reading or out of your portal reading is covered again in the T20 test. So that way you are comprehensively covering current affairs, and it is easier to follow up because you have only one register in which you are writing all the notes. So that's how I kept my current affairs strategy. Followed by this, I would take up Vision Monthly magazine. So every month it comes, and so when you are revising, whenever the magazine comes, along with the magazine, what you can do is you can revise the notes that you have made in your register. Till then, whatever you have made, you take up the magazine. Along with the magazine, you revise those notes as well. So that is how you are able to, if you have made a note in maybe say May, by next May, you'll be able to make like 12 revisions of the same. If it came in June, 11 revisions of the same. If in July, 10 revisions of the same. So wouldn't it be easier for you to follow that up? It would be, because when you are revising it with the Vision Monthly Current Affairs magazine, it came to, for me, it took around 3 hours. So once a month, 3 hours taking out for current affairs, which also includes revision, which also includes adding up to your current affairs. I think it's a fair deal, right? All right, so that was about current affairs. Now I would like to share my source list. So this diary only comprises of the source list, which I've been very geared to share with you. We'll begin with the first, which is history. Talking about ancient history, you have to follow the NCERTs. You can also you can also go through the notes which are provided in the class to you. Nitin Singhania book, chapter 1 is to be done very comprehensively for art and culture, which is very, very, very beneficial. It also comes with a pictorial thing. So it's also very entertaining to read. So it's not a boring exercise. However, it's a very engaging process because it comes with pictures. So you are not only learning the names of the temples, but you are also seeing the pictorial the pictorial representation of the temple. So you actually know what is your pith, what is the duar, what is the ardha mandapa. So you actually can see and relate. So make that exercise a learning experience, a fun learning experience, and I think it should really help you. Talking about the medieval history, old NCERT is very important for both class 11th and 12th. I also did new NCERT, more so for the Vijayanagar part of it. So we have seen, if you see previous year question papers from prelims, you will see there are various questions which have been asked from the Vijayanagar part. So for that I think is missing from the old NCERT. So you can always consult new NCERTs for that. Talking about modern India, it's everyone knows the source here. It's Spectrum. So Spectrum is a very comprehensive, holistic source which you can refer to, though I do not promise you questions from there, but at least you will understand your history from that. So it will really help you in the mains answer writing practice. Prelims, okay, there are certain questions which might come out of there, but if you have read it, and in case the question provide you a scope of elimination, this I need to mention, if they provide you a scope of elimination, you would be able to do. Talking about geography, geography I divided into 3 parts, one being physical geography. Many people do class 11th geography for the same. But I refer to G.C. Leong because I found it very comprehensive. Also, the second part of the book, which is the biomes, is very, very important, not to be missed, both for geography as well as for ecology and environment. Indian geography, class 12th NCERT, very good, written in a very simple and lucid language, easy to follow up, so you can always do that. Physiography is one part which is extremely detailed and very nice to follow up. Location-based topics are something which you need to work upon, so you do not find a consolidated material for the same. Location-based topics, you can actually search for various industries, for instance, iron and steel industry on YouTube, and a video crops up and you do it from there. Or you can follow this source which I have used very extensively, which is called EPG Pathshala. So these are the government colleges master's classes which are conducted on EPG Pathshala. So it's a very comprehensive source. Do not make it very comprehensive, just use it for understanding purposes and draw out certain points out of that. Society, again, I have done comprehensively from EPG Pathshala. For instance, if you see your syllabus and the topics in society, for example, if there's a religion, so what you do is you type religion on YouTube along with EPG Pathshala. So religion, EPG Pathshala, you'll get an entire lecture out of there. The lecture would be around 1.5 hours, and everything, it covers everything that is required for religion. So society is one subject which doesn't come very much in prelims, which you need to do mostly for mains. And I think there is no other comprehensive source than EPG Pathshala that covers society in that way. So it's a very easy thing. Society, broadly, there would be around 10-12 topics which you can cover in, like, if the video, for example, is for 1 hour, you can do it in like 10-12 hours again. GS2, talking about polity, you know the source again, it's Lakshmikant. ARC2 report. You can follow the entire report, or you can follow the summaries which are available in the market. Pavneet Singh sir, I think, has released a summary of the same. So you can follow that up. Though I haven't read the summary, I read the entire report, but not in detail, but maybe the headings of the report, so as to understand what the report is trying to say. There is another source which is, and this is mainly for mains, so do not do ARC2 report for your prelims. It's mostly for mains, for your way forward part of the answers. And so not only about the ARC report, but also the Vidhi policy for legal research. That is what I followed for my way forward Wala domain. So there is Sarkaria Commission report. There are various reports that you would need to follow up in polity in order to be able to write a good answer. So along with Lakshmikant really helps you at the prelims level, but for the mains level, I think you really need to do those reports. So find them up, they are available on internet, the PDFs are available, you wouldn't need to, spend a penny for that. You can easily find just Google the reports and you'll get the entire PDF. Governance EPG Pathshala again. So type NGO EPG Pathshala on YouTube and you'll find an entire lecture on NGOs. And you can always take out whatever you require out of there. So if you do that, if you type all your topics on YouTube along with EPG Pathshala, so you get 1 hour lecture for the same. You're able to complete the entire topic in like 12-13 hours, which can be like easily divided into maybe 6 days, 2 hours per day. Not very difficult exercise to follow. And all you'll have is a write-up of about 15-20 pages. Easy to follow up. Mains, you don't need to do anything. All you have to do is just read that up. And how do you update it? You update it with whatever comes in the newspaper. For instance, there is an NGO which has been highlighted very much in the newspaper these days. What you do is you take out your section on NGOs wherein you have a write-up ready for your NGOs. And wherever you can put in, use that as an example. Talking about social issues, newspapers are a must here. Then there is a show on Rajya Sabha TV which is called The Big Picture. You can always identify the social issues out of there. Do not see the entire show, just see which issue is likely to come in this year's mains. So you know the theme of the episode for that day. So you identify that theme. For instance, they're talking about sanitation workers. So you know one of the social issues is based on the problems of sanitation workers or Safai Karamcharis. You note that down and then you find a write-up somewhere on the internet about the same. So social issues is one topic which is very current oriented. So just identify what are the odds of this topic coming up and search it on maybe some forum. Talking about international relations, Ministry of External Affairs, there are various write-ups which are divided, which are already classified into themes. So it's easier. Whenever you get a question on, say, bilateral relations, what do? You have a structure of your answer ready. You divide it into geopolitical, geo-economic, cultural, energy-related, and international organizations that both these countries share. So now you have 5 points ready. All you need to do is, based on the country, you need to change the substance under these 5 headings. So for international relations, if you get a question related to the bilateral relations, what you do is, you already make your 5 headings ready and the write-up or the writing material which is to be done under these headings is to be changed according to the country. And how do you find what is to be written with respect to that country? You find it on Ministry of External Affairs website. Then there is also a show called Rajya Sabha TV India's World, which is very, very informative related to international relations, which you can also follow, but that's optional. Talking about GS3, so you have environment and ecology, which is very, very, very difficult for students to follow a single source for the same thing. There are various that follow a Shankar IAS book for the same. And but I did not follow that. So I picked up a book which is slightly less bulky. It's one by Vaishali Anand ma'am. So I picked that book up in order to clear up my basics, but that doesn't help you very much when it comes to prelims. So prelims, environment and ecology is mostly current oriented. So here you need to focus on your current affairs, which you have already made notes of. The big picture, there are various environmental issues which are also highlighted in the big picture by Rajya Sabha TV. So you can always note them down and find a write-up on the same, either from Google or YouTube or wherever you find it. Economics, it's easier to do your economics by dividing it into 4 domains, one being fiscal, the other being monetary, Then there is infrastructure, and then there is development. So when it comes to fiscal, you would write about the government policies. You would write about the fiscal health of the country. You would write about the various deficits in the country and how the problem can be solved. When it comes to monetary, it's mostly related to the banks, what ails a bank in the country, what is the solution for improving the banking sector. That's how you can go about it. Infrastructure, again, it comes about a lot of things. Asset monetization is a part of infrastructure. Infrastructure would be development of roads. What are the schemes that goes on into development of roads, railways? Everything comes into the infrastructure domain. And the fourth one is development, wherein comes your problems of unemployment, problems of labor force, low women participation in the labor force. So all these problems come under the development domain. So when you have divided your entire economics into 4 verticals, it again becomes easier for you to follow it up. Here the sources would be economic survey for your budgetary, for your problems ailing various sectors. Budget for the various allocations that the government has made and the various schemes that the government has made in this regard. For instance, if there's a question on textile sector, you find in the budget that there's a scheme called PM Mitra. And you can always use it. It will add value to your answer, definitely. And then newspaper, again, the various schemes that are announced are mostly announced in the newspapers as well, or are covered comprehensively in the newspaper as well. So your notes would already have them. Next being internal security. Again, you need to identify the basic topics of internal security, such as cyber security, border security, then integrated border management. These are some of the things which are which feature year after year. I mean, we have always seen a question on cyber security from 2013. There hasn't been a single year that a question on cybersecurity has not come up. So cybersecurity becomes an extremely important domain when it comes to internal security, and you really need to do it. For this, Vision IAS material is crisp and should do, right? Next being your disaster management. Here you need to do your NDMA guidelines. There are NDMA, National Disaster Management Authority. They issue guidelines. So what you do is you see those guidelines. Do not do them very comprehensively. Divide them into 3 verticals again. What you should do before disaster, during disaster, after disaster. So before disaster is mostly pandemic preparedness. During disaster, it's mostly response. And after disaster, it's recovery. So you divide your course of action into these 3 parts. Pick up few pointers from NDMA guidelines. Do not do it comprehensively. Every point you do not need to remember. Just know if I'm writing before disaster. So in terms of a cyclone, what would I need? I would need shelter belts. That term shelter belts you would get from NDMA guidelines. And just write it there. This is 1 point. So you can, for all these 3 steps, you can take 2 points each. And that would help suffice. Science and tech. Talking about science and tech, herein your current affairs become very, very, very important again. So whatever is in the current affairs or the new technologies that have come up are likely to be asked here. So for instance, ChatGPT is very much in news. So there might be a question as to what exactly it is. What are the advantages, what are the challenges, and how would you, what would be the way forward going about the same? So that is how science and tech is mostly about the recent technologies. Nanotechnology comes up here, quantum technology comes up here. So mains questions are mostly along those lines. So when you prepare a question, you find out about the technology which has been very much in news or has been introduced recently. You prepare an introduction for the same as to what the technology is. It always starts with what is it. Then what are the advantages of it? What are the disadvantages of it? And what are the solutions that should be pursued further? So that is all you need to do for science and tech, which is very current oriented. And I think if you follow Vision monthly magazines, you'd be able to do that for the subjective part of the same. GS4, this is very difficult, like very, very difficult, but an exam that can make it for you or break it for you. So yes. So talking about GS4, the theoretical part of it, I followed S. Ansari sir's video for the same. He works in Lukman IAS. And if you look up the videos, you'll find them either on Telegram or YouTube very easily. And I think if you follow them, it would be easier for you to do the theoretical part of it, or you can always follow your class notes for the same. Then you always supplement it with the examples. And where do you get the examples from? Again, from your newspapers. So yes, I mean, if you're writing an answer in ethics and you are not supplementing it with an example, that's no answer for the examiner. So for the evaluator, that's no answer, because they all know the theoretical part of it, but they would want to see you integrating it with the examples as well. So examples, you'll have to do that bit yourself, but the theoretical part, you'll easily find it on YouTube. Then there's case studies. Talking about case studies, so half of the paper is about case studies. So how can you go about with case studies? Always start with a short introduction of the same. So if the case study is about child marriage, so you have an entire big case study on how a child was forced into marriage, and you know what are the after effects have been, and how would you proceed further. So what you do is you always begin with an introduction, a general introduction to your answer, which talks about child marriage. So it can be like an anecdote about child marriage. It can always be data about child marriage which you throw up, and it shouldn't be more than like 2-3 lines. After that, you write the key stakeholders. Even if they were not asked, I made it a practice of writing the key stakeholders, because that also fills up my space in the answer booklet. You get around roughly 4 pages to write for your case study. You would want to fill that space, right? You don't want to leave the space empty. So what you do is you can always write key stakeholders, make a diagram for the same, a Venn diagram sort of a thing. In between you write key stakeholders and then put arrows and write the actual stakeholders which are involved. And after that you address the demands of the question. So the demands of the question will be very crisp in pointers. A, what should be done in this situation? B, what is the ethical problems? What are the ethical problems involved in this situation? And C, what should the person do in this situation? This sort of thing. And after giving an introduction, after giving your key stakeholders, you go to these specific questions and you answer them specifically. After that, all right, so we are done with GS4 here. Theoretical S. Ansari sir, couple them with examples and then do your case studies bit by bit. Then comes essay. Like essay is again a make it or break it thing here. So it is generally assumed that if you're writing answers for GS1, GS2 and GS3, the answers would more or less be the same for all the students because they are all following the same sources. But when it comes to GS4, the examples cannot be the same for all the students. The case study or the analytical approach cannot be the same for all the students. So herein comes the difference as to who would make it to the holy PDF and who would be out of it. So this is where the difference comes. Similarly, essay is something which cannot be the same for, the essay writing skills cannot be the same for every student. So herein you need to make a difference. And how do you make a difference here? First of all, there are 2 essays which you are required to write. What people do is people generally make a structure for their essays and they follow the same structure for both the essays. But do you think when you are making the same structure for both the essays, the evaluator would be interested? No, right? He has already read the same thing in your previous answer and he is going through the same structure in your other answer. So I would highly suggest that you make 2 structures, not 1 but 2 structures for your essay, which you know would be different from each other. So that distinguishes, that provides a distinguishing point between your 2 essays and would keep the examiner engaged. The other thing would be essay, even if the essays or the themes which are asked which are asked in the question are philosophical in nature. UPSC evaluators do not want you to provide very philosophical insights. So don't go about talking, don't go talking about like abstract things. Do not bring in Plato's, Aristotle's strategies in it. I mean, you can always begin with this, begin by mentioning the same, but you need to substantiate your points with your examples or the real life situations or the current events that are happening. So make a note of the same thing. Do not make them abstract and open-ended, but also substantiate them with some real life arguments. Also, I follow two different structures for both my essays, which have been one essay I would always write based on various themes. For instance, I would look at the essay, I would look at the topic, and then how I would answer my essay would be in a manner like politically, socially, ecologically, this way. So I would try to make my essay comprehensive based on as much as I can cover. So one essay I would do like that, and the other essay I would break that essay. If it is a big topic, I would break it into parts and then write on each part. So that is just an example of how you can, provide a distinguishing point between both your essays. Anthropology, if I may. I mean, do you really want to know about anthropology, or if I may skip that part? Depends on you. All right. So anthropology I'll quickly just list down. I wouldn't substantiate it. I would just list down the sources that I have used, and I would attribute my source list to Akshay Jain sir. So this is not my source list. I'm telling you again, I followed his. First of all, I picked up his book, which is called Anthropology Demystified by Akshay Jain sir. Then I ordered Ved sir's notes for the same. I did not take a coaching for anthropology. So if you are wondering if you can study anthropology on your own or optional subject on your own, yes, you can do that if you have your sources identified. So, Anthropology Demystified by Akshay Jain sir, Ved sir's notes, which you can always order online. They are available on Amazon as well. For socio-cultural anthropology, so I'll divide paper 1 into socio-cultural anthropology, physical anthropology, archaeology, into 3. And socio-cultural anthropology, there is a book called In Search of Ourselves by Ved sir, so you can always refer to that. History of Anthropological Thought, Upadhyaya and Pandey, very, very important, but that can be, you can also find the crisp, it in a crisp form. So it's a very bulky book. It's about 300 plus pages. If you're not able to read that, what you can do is you can read this Anthropological Theories, which is the 6th unit in paper 1. From Akshay Jain sir's book, which is called Anthropology Demystified, and he has comprised it into 40 pages. So 300 pages versus 40 pages, the choice is yours. So, yes, it's Socio-Cultural Anthropology, In Search of Ourselves by Ved sir, History of Anthropological Thought by Upadhyaya and Pandey, or Unit 6 of Anthropology Demystified by Akshay Jain sir. Physical anthropology, if we talk about that, then there is a book called Physical Anthropology by P. Nath, which is very, very, very good in terms of your molecular aspects or your cellular aspects. It is very good book. So you can always refer to that. Archaeology, there is a book by D.K. Bhattacharya, which is by far the best book on archaeology, which will help you for both archaeology in paper 1 and archaeology in paper 2 as well. It's by D.K. Bhattacharya, an outline of Indian prehistory. Amazing, amazing book to follow up. And it's also very, it's not a very bulky book. So, बहुत छोटी book है वो. It comprises about 60 pages. Can be easily covered, like easily covered in 3 days if you study for about 6 to 8 hours per day. Then come to paper 2, you have Indian Anthropology, which the book itself is called Indian Anthropology by Nadeem Hasnain, and then you have Tribal Sphere again by Nadeem Hasnain. Then you can always supplement them with certain topics you are not able to find in these sources, you can always search them on EPG Pathshala. So again, what you do is you write the topic which you are searching for, and then you do EPG Pathshala, and you'll find an entire 1-hour lecture on the same. And then you can always follow some test series. I've been told that Vision IAS is starting with anthropology test series this year. The one that I followed was L2A. And so they always evaluate your answers, and after evaluation, they actually release their answer key for the same. So those answers you can also follow up. Those are also very great. And when it comes to anthropology, I would highly recommend that you do the previous year question papers from about 1990. Because the subject is not very current oriented, it is kind of static, and we see repetition of questions year after year. So there are chances that if you do your, if you see previous year questions from 1990 onwards till maybe 2022, then you'll find at least 6-7 questions which would be similar to the previous year questions. So that is all about anthropology. So this has been a very detailed subject-wise source list. I hope it will help you guys. So we've discussed about syllabus, how to read your syllabus, how to classify your syllabus. We have talked about how to do your current affairs. We've talked about the source list. We've talked about anthropology, what strategy you should adopt, and the source list for the same. And what else are you looking for? About CSAT. So CSAT, I have seen people being very, very terrified of CSAT, maybe because this is the only paper that comprises your maths. So yes. All right. So do not worry, because do not think that it only comprises of maths. It comprises of maths, comprehension, and reasoning as well. So I was talking to, just a minute. So I was talking to Anubhav sir, Abhi, he took a session with you, and he said he has never attempted maths in CSAT. Like never in his 5 attempts has he attempted maths from CSAT, and he has cleared CSAT in all the 5 goes. So if you're terrified of maths, don't be, just make your comprehension strong. And if you do only comprehensions, then you're able to attempt, for example, 37 questions out of CSAT and reasoning. I think you're good to go and you'll be able to clear. But the condition is that your efficiency is very high in these. If you're leaving out maths, make sure your comprehension and your reasoning is very good. And in maths, if you want to, you can always identify the areas where the questions always come from. And what you can do is, from the areas where repeated questions come from, and where you can easily and directly apply the formulas, try to target those questions. So learn about 15-20 formulas and go to the exam. And even if you are not able to attempt maths questions, make sure you do your comprehension and your reasoning great, and I think you'll be able to clear. All right. In optional paper, answer writing is very different as compared to your GS paper. GS paper, you have to be very crisp. However, when it comes to your optional, they are requiring a certain level of expertise for the same. So you need to identify how many questions are there in your optional that you need to answer. Then you divide them into the time limit based on the marks that are allotted for the same. And you try to complete your answers within the time frame. So timing becomes very important when it comes to optional. You need to answer each and every question. Then your chances of getting, so you would not want to write a question extremely well and maybe get, like, if you write an extremely brilliant answer, out of 10 you'll get maybe a 5. An extremely brilliant answer. And so if you're writing it at the cost of 1 question, what you're doing is, even if you write a very average answer, you would get 4.5. So what you have done is you have earned yourself 1.5 mark by writing an extremely well answer. which you could have, could have easily compromised for an average answer, and here you would get 4 marks, there you would get 4 marks. In effect, you are getting 8 marks. So never go for your expertise. In optional as well, have prepared answers. So prepare your answers beforehand and just copy them in the exam. That I think should do. Also, in terms of optional, you should, wherever you can, you should always include the schematics or the flow charts. That would really help, because the evaluator gets an impression that you know your subject well. So optional, I think your schematics and diagrams should do. Moderate answers would do good. Timekeeping is a good practice that you should keep up. And so yeah, these things can be done. Yes. So tribal anthropology, it becomes very important. So most of the things, for instance, displacement related data and everything, all of them stems from Khakha report. So yes, you can do, and it's not a very bulky report. But you don't have to read all of them. You can always go by the broad headings and whatever thing you need to pick up out of there. For instance, if you're talking about displacement, you do not need to read an entire write-up on displacement, but take up one data from displacement. For example, there is one which says that 47% of the displaced people are tribals. So what do? I've only taken this from the displacement domain of Khakha report. So displacement domain could be like 8 to 10 pages, but what I require is one data point. So what it takes me about like 50 seconds to pick that up. So you don't need to do the entire thing, you only need to pick things up here and there. That you will learn when you actually, when you do your anthropological theories, you'll realize the importance of quoting scholars, and you would actually be able to remember all of them. So anthropological theories, unit 6 of paper 1, it is entirely about scholars, and if you do it thoroughly, not the first time maybe, but if you do it like the third time, you would be able to understand everything about the scholars. So you would actually know who E.B. Tyler was, what was the time frame he was writing in, which were the books that he actually wrote. So there was Primitive Culture he wrote in 1871, which would actually be there. And if he has written on primitive culture, then definitely the definition of culture should stem from that book. So all of these links you'll be able to form once you read Unit 6. So I would strongly recommend that after doing your first part on basics, introduction to anthropology and the research methodology, you straight away go to anthropological theories and then do your sociocultural anthropology and biological anthropology. Thank you.
Ma'am, how much time it takes you to complete your optional? As you stated that you completed your optional without taking any coaching, so, and having no background in anthropology. As anthropology is a subject which no one having a background in that subject. So how many hours and how many months it will take you to complete that?
For me, it took, because anthropology is a subject that you do not require much to supplement with the current studies. So you can easily complete the subject in 3.5 months, provided you study it every day for around 8 to 10 hours. Okay.
Hello, ma'am. Here.
All right.
Hello, ma'am. This is Aniket. Ma'am, first, was your first attempt?
No, this was my third attempt.
Okay. Ma'am.
That's such a disappointment coming from you.
No. Actually, ma'am, so my question is that when we are thinking about UPSC, then the first thing people are suggesting that just isolate yourself. But I have gone through your Instagram account. Ma'am, how you manage it, ma'am?
If where there is a will, there is a way. I'm asking this because I am so like that. There are 24 hours in a day.
Yes.
I give 1 hour every day for current affairs.
Yes.
I give 6 to 8 hours every day for static portion. That makes about 9 hours of my day. I stay awake for 12 hours a day.
Okay.
So where are the rest 3 hours? They go into my Instagram.
But ma'am, I've seen that you were means more of time you were on the trip means outside the India. So how you manage that with your preparation and UPSC preparation?
So every 15 days you can reward yourself with 1 day off, right?
Okay.
So that makes 2 days off in a month.
Okay.
If you do the same for 6 months, there are 12 days off. I wouldn't take them every 15 days. I would take them compiled.
Compile. Okay. Okay. Thank you, ma'am.
All right, thank you.
Hello, ma'am.
Just a minute. Just a minute.
Yeah.
All right? Yeah. I'll answer this after the class. All right? Yeah. Okay, so even if you don't remember your data points, you can always write trends. For instance, if it is increasing or decreasing, increasing about. So there is this word about, which is very important. So you give an impression that you are not sure about the figure, but you have a rough idea of the same. So when you've been reading the same thing for like 12 months now, so every unemployment data would feature in about every 15-20 days, right? And you are repeatedly seeing it. So yeah, that is changing, but the trend remains largely the same. So if unemployment, the time I was writing my exam, so the unemployment levels were very high, and this was the major news, that all-time high unemployment levels, which was close to 8.6%. So it might, by the time I was writing my mains, it would have changed, I knew. So what I did was, I wrote approximately 8%. You can always use approximation, and a few things I'll tell you after the class. Yeah. Oh, there was a question coming from there. I'll come back to you after that. Yes.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am, for giving me opportunity. Yeah, so actually, I have also regarding question about anthropology.
All right.
And ma'am, so I have unlimited resources right now because I had selected from that Anurag Devsatti sir already in his blog. He has uploaded a lot of things about each and every section. So I just collected resources from a lot of places, and I think that right now I got stuck on that place because I think I have unlimited resources, and I don't know where I have to study and where I have to start. I tried to study from 2.1 to 2.5. I tried to study with myself on, and I completed few sections of anthropology, and then after. Actually, my father told me to you can go and take some classes because I am not that much good in English, and because I come from Hindi background. So what do you think, that I should take classes or?
Are you writing your answers in Hindi or in English?
No, I am going to write each and everything in English, ma'am.
In English?
Yeah.
All right, but I would like to say that it is not important to write in a very fluent English. So what they are looking for is that you understand the concept and you write and you are able to express it, though not in a very fancy language. So you can always make points and write in a very crude English. That would also do. For instance, displacement rate, and make a colon. So rather than framing an entire sentence, what you're doing is you're just writing the data point by introducing a colon in between. So you write displacement rate colon 47%, right? So that's how you can do. You do not need to frame entire sentences. It's okay, can be done. So you do not need a very good English for to be able to crack this exam. The only place where you need good English is your essay. So that is only to be done. And talking about anthropology and your unlimited sources for the same, I have given you a source list just now. So you can always follow that up. Also, if you begin with anthropology preparation, it is always advisable that you do the introduction part first. Though it is very, very boring, you would not want to do it. But it is advisable that you do it because then you get a sense of what the subject is, how it is classified. So you have straight away gone to sociocultural anthropology without knowing the 4 classifications of anthropology which are contained in the first unit of the first unit, half of the first unit of paper 1. So that is why it is advisable that you do your introduction first, followed by your research methods in anthropology, which is unit 8, and then move on to sociocultural anthropology.
Ma'am, from starting from like we are going through that 1990s of anthropology questions like PYQs. So I think I just try to see all the questions, and then I know that there are few questions which is repeatedly asked in that UPSC examination. So I thought let's go to that question who is coming continuously in the UPSC, because not that we are going to give attempt to all the question. And because we have to focus on the future year question, because we are trying to pretend that what type of question will be come in the examination, not that because it's a past type of question that is it was PIQ.
I'll give you a tip. If you're doing sociocultural anthropology, it's very less scoring. So I tried in my paper 1 to write as least answers from sociocultural anthropology, though it's the most interesting phase. But it is very difficult to write answers from sociocultural anthropology. So I think in my paper 1, I attempted most questions from introduction, physical anthropology, archaeology, and sociocultural anthropology. I think I have attempted only 1 question. So when you actually write your test series, that is the time when you'll be able to identify which is the area you need to focus more rather than the questions that have come up. Because in optional, always remember there are you have a choice which is absent in your GS papers. So if you have a choice, exercise it. So there are various domains which you can neglect, though the questions have been repeatedly asked from there, because they would be optional for you to attempt, right? So never go by that trend.
Ma'am, in that, like when we are reading about that marriage payments and that sector, then we have to code some examples like any kind of tribals area, like any area which is dominated by tribal, and a lot of peoples were living over there. So we are going to give examples from there. So we search on the Google and try to find that. So would you suggest me any kind of sources that where we can get a lot of tribals which is related to such as polygamy, this kind of marriage where it's happened in the Nigeria, Africa, so such kind of
this
place.
can be managed in your classification. So there is a chapter on classification of tribes in Nadeem Hasnain itself. So he has classified the tribes in various manner. For instance, geographically he has classified the tribes, linguistically he has classified the tribes. So from there you know various tribes. Now try to understand the characteristics of each tribe there itself. So that for example, if you have come across Nayar tribe in the south, in the geographical classification wherein Nayar tribe is relegated to South India. So what you do is you pick up Nayar tribe, you see what is practiced within Nayar tribe. It's a polyandrous society, right? Women have many husbands. So it's a polyandrous society, you write it there. So whenever a question comes from polyandry, you already know through your classification study that I have to quote Nayar as an example. So do not invent new tribes, use the tribes that have already been given to you in the classification chapter.
But ma'am, a lot of people told me that we have to code new type of example, because all this kind of example already used by someone else. So if we really want to achieve good marks in our examination, then we have to try new examples.
How much can you learn? You also have to do GS 1, 2, 3, 4, essay. You have to do your anthropology. How much can you accommodate here?
Ma'am, actually we
You
have to
try to limit it, right?
Yeah,
I mean, if you want to do it and you have maybe confidence in yourself that you can actually learn everything that is around, then good luck. You can always do that. But I mean, I was not as smart, so I couldn't do that. If you think you can do that, then that would be great. But the thing is, it is very difficult task, right?
One more question, ma'am.
Yeah.
I actually in that thinkers area. So how many thinkers we have to know? Because
Again, you can know as many as you want, But I think the ones that you cannot compromise upon are the ones that have been included in the Unit 6 anthropological theory section. So there, if you are studying classical evolutionism, you are being introduced to approximately 6 thinkers. Then you go to diffusionism. You are being introduced to like 4 or 5 thinkers. Then you go to functionalism. Malinowski comes in. Then you go to structural functionalism. A.R. Radcliffe Brown comes in. So for every theory, you need to know the prominent thinkers at least.
Lot of people gave us lot of type of like a lot of thinkers are here, which is like a lot of socialist sociology thinkers who is also giving
Emily Durkheim.
yeah, and Murdoch ma'am, like Lord Kimpton. So a lot of thinkers were here who had given a lot of important role in that sector of anthropology. So
If you're doing religion, then Durkheim becomes very important, because the definition that we use for religion in anthropology has been given by him. When you are studying culture, E.B. Tyler becomes very important there. When you are doing your differences between magic, religion, and science, there's another one, I've forgotten the name, but he becomes very important. So yes, based on your topics also, you need to identify various scholars, but they just does not come up from anywhere. So Durkheim, I know, is not taught in anthropology that much and has been imported from sociology, but when you see E.B. Tyler, when you study culture, you're not only studying E.B. Tyler, you're studying Malinowski, and both of them have been given their due importance in Unit 6 as well, right? Followed by magic, religion, and science. I forgot the name, but this person belongs to classical evolutionism school, which is also covered in anthropological theory. So if you can identify a lot of people that you can converge in your study, that would be a brilliant exercise to do, because that way you get to remember less and you would be able to write a decent answer. If you try to incorporate everyone who has spoken on the subject, then it becomes a very difficult exercise in terms of remembering them, also in terms of being able to incorporate them in an answer which comes with a limited word limit.
Lesson which we don't do in that sector, because when we are preparing for that optional subject. So any suggestion which we don't do while preparing, because we thought that we have to do this because we want good marks we want more marks in that examination than we will achieve.
How many more marks? I already told her that if you write a moderate answer, you'll get 4.5 marks, and if you write an exceptionally great answer, you'll get 5.5 marks. 1 or 0.5 marks. Would you go through like 15 scholars for one in order to be able to increase 1.5 marks, which 1 or 0.5 marks, which would take up about like 4 or 5 hours of your time just remembering those scholars, and then again 4 or 5 hours of your time every subsequent revision? Or you would just let it go and try to see a broader picture and cover as many topics as you can, because you'd be able to write more answers then.
Got it.
I mean, this is how I think. I am a very calculative person, so I would calculate each and every second that I'm sparing. So if you are not such and you think you need to understand a subject to the level of PhD, being able to do a PhD in the subject, you are always welcome to do the same thing, right? So it always.
The major branches. So can you please tell me some best resource for these 3 points?
For these 3.
So I can go through to complete this 3 points. Which I find very much inclusive.
All right. So yes. It's again Anthropology Demystified by Akshay Jain sir. Covers it very well. So you have a well-defined answer for meaning, you have a well-defined answer for scope, and you have a well-defined answer for relevance. And then research methods again comes into the picture. So that is a very Relationship with other disciplines, he has also covered that. Or you can, what you can do is you can also identify or look it up by your own as well. So if it is history and anthropology, which you know the content, so you can always Google them up, find similarities 5 points, differences 5 points, right? Just a minute, yeah. इकोनॉमिक्स पर्सपेक्टिव में अगर आपको बेसिक नॉलेज चाहिए तो शंकर आईएएस की एक बुक आती है, उसको आप रेफर कर सकते हैं. डिपेंड करता है. मैं क्या करती थी, मैं एक सब्जेक्ट उठाती थी, उसको कंप्लीट करती थी, फिर दूसरे सब्जेक्ट के पास जाती थी. तो अगर आपको अपना डे डिवाइड करना है कि आपको थोड़ा सा ऑप्शनल पढ़ना है, थोड़ा सा जीएस पढ़ना है, तो आप 50-50 भी डिवाइड कर सकते हैं और 60-40 भी डिवाइड कर सकते हैं, जिसमें 60 आपके ऑप्शनल में जाना चाहिए. नो. इंटरव्यू में आपकी लैंग्वेज की शुद्धि पर वो ध्यान नहीं दे रहे हैं. वो नहीं देख रहे हैं कि आप बिल्कुल रिफाइंड हिंदी में बोलें, बिल्कुल जो हिंदी के टिपिकल वर्ड्स होते हैं आप उन्हें उठाएं. बट अगर आप अपने आप को एक्सप्रेस कर पा रहे हैं हिंदी में, दैट इज़ सफिशिएंट. यस, थैंक यू. Optional, I scored 141 in paper 1 and 144 in paper 2. So in effect, it's 285. Mains answer writing. What was my strategy for the same? So when should we start? So I started writing mains answers after about 5.5 months of my preparation. So by this time I had done all the subjects at least once. So I was in a position that I knew where to start from and where to end. So I started writing answers about 5 to 5 months, 5 to 5.5 months after the preparation, till 2 months before prelims. That was when I stopped. My first stage of answer writing, which is this, was mostly an assessment stage wherein I was only understanding what are my strengths, what are my weaknesses, what can I leave behind, what can I not leave behind. So one key takeaway from this practice was that I realized I'm a very slow writer when it comes to mains. So if I am so slow, it would be very difficult for me to incorporate the diagrams as well. If I start incorporating the diagrams which everyone else is doing, it will slow me down further. That is why I did not make diagrams. So how this helped me is that if I did not assess myself, I would have gone into the rush of incorporating diagrams, which would have slowed me down and would have costed me my marks. So in this stage, till before, like 2 months before the prelims, you assess yourself, you identify what are your strengths, weaknesses, and how you can improve them. After prelims, then you get into an aggressive answer writing, wherein you get about like 2.5, 3 months, wherein you perfect the art of answer writing. By this time, you already know your strengths, weaknesses, and something you cannot compromise upon. Now the task is to, with each succeeding answer that you write, to improve yourself. And always make sure that whenever you're attempting a test, time yourself. So if the time is up, you cannot even take 1 minute, right? So, simulate your experience that way to the real life examination. Yes. In interview, there are mostly questions. All right, so I'll tell you specific questions that I faced during interview. So interview questions are mostly related to your DAF. And to the current affairs. So these are the two prominent areas where the questions come from: DAF and your current affairs. So the first question that was posed to me was based on what my name means, which comes directly from my DAF, because my name was on my DAF. Then I was asked about my hobby, which was again on my DAF. Then there were general questions like what is the importance of ethics in daily life, which is a very general question, and if you have read your ethics properly, GS4 properly you have written, you'll be able to answer that question. After that, the question moved towards current domain. So there were questions from social sector, how women empowerment is important, and so every day in the newspaper it was there. Then questions were from economics. So there were 5-6 questions which were posed from economics domain itself to me, which were based on how unemployment can be tackled, casual labor, how can we deal with the problem of casual labor and all of such. After that, the question again went on to my DAF. So I was asked whether, why did I change my, why did I not go with English literature as my optional? English literature was the subject at the graduation level for me. Why didn't I choose it? So the question went on to that. And then there were a few questions from my optional, which was again in the DAF, anthropology. Questions from English literature, again in the DAF. And so they concluded it with a few questions from international relations, because I was doing my master's in international relations back then. All right. My hobby was yoga, jogging, and reading. So there was a question from yoga. Say, I'm sorry, sir, I'm unable to recall. Say that. Be honest. Yeah. Yes, yes. I already told you to divide your economics preparation into 4 verticals, and the verticals are fiscal, monetary, infrastructure, development. When you say inclusive growth, it falls under the development domain. So you identify the topics within each domain, within each vertical, and you try to find the answers either in your class notes, or inclusive growth is a topic which is covered in one form or the other in one of the monthly magazines for sure, every year. So every year there would be something about inclusive growth coming in the monthly magazine in a very well structured answer with your pointers. So take out 5 points for inclusive growth. What are the hindrances? What is inclusive growth? Data point on inclusive growth. What are the hindrances that do not let us achieve inclusive growth? How will we benefit if we achieve inclusive growth? And what are the solutions? So divide your answer like that. And for every domain, 5 points from your monthly magazine. Yeah. What? BOP, balance of payment. Yes, yes. For prelims, you need to go a little intense into the preparation, but I think it will help if you read your economic survey thoroughly and the terms that you. So if you see BOP, it would definitely be in one of the chapters of your economic survey will be on balance of payment. So if you see balance of payment in your economic survey, this is an economic phrase. So if it's an economic phrase, look it up at Google. So understand what it means, right? Shankar IAS book on economics. Shankar IAS Coaching Institute has published a book on economics that can be. Yes, it covers all the traditional topics. And if you want to go to extreme lengths, then you can also do. So in my 12th grade, I had economics as one of the subjects. So therein, we were taught this book. We were given this book on macroeconomics. It was Saraswati. Maybe. So we were given Saraswati. So that is one book on macroeconomics that you can always follow very well. The topics have been covered very well, but do not follow the first chapter because it has got numericals as well. So that can be easily avoided, and after that you can. That covers everything. Everything, yeah. It will also cover not only the traditional topics, but also the current topics it will cover. All right.
Good afternoon, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
All right.
First of all, congratulations from clearing the UPSC from Hapur.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
I am from Hapur.
Oh, that's great.
Ma'am, this year prelims was very tough.
Yeah.
You have seen, ma'am, how to
Yeah.
tackle the prelims.
How to tackle the prelims? Go on with your traditional approach. Read every subject. Do your current affairs well. Practice, practice, practice. Because till the time you do not practice, your knowledge cannot help you out, right?
Ma'am, I gave approximately 35 tests. But the options are very difficult this year prelims. How to tackle?
Exactly. I'm coming on that. So if they are difficult, so you need to calm yourself down during the exam. There would be certain things that wouldn't seem like all right to you when you read all the sentences, and try to read all of them with an open mind. So do not panic during the exam, and even if the exam seems very difficult to you, always know in your heart it is difficult for everyone else in the room, or for everyone else giving the exam. So if you're not able to do it, after a thorough preparation of the same, others are also not able to do it, and that will have an impact on the cutoff. So your chain of thought should run that way while you're appearing for the exam, rather than in a negative manner, which hampers your rational ability to do the subsequent questions as well, right?
And ma'am, how to prepare means how many months and how much test I have to do for the mains?
I have just answered the question. You have to do it in 2 stages, 1 till 2 months before the prelims, wherein which is an assessment stage, and then the other one after prelims, which is an aggressive stage, and that is how you can do it. And talking about the test series, so you choose one test series. After one test series you can choose before prelims. There you can give tests like widely spaced, like you've given one test after 2 weeks. That's how you can do that. And after prelims you need to take one more test series, which is all new, which gets released after prelims. And when you do this test series, what you do is try to give the test when they are released. So that way, between prelims and mains, you'll be able to write 28 tests. I did that, and that is good enough, because when you sit there, you'd be thoroughly prepared. But write them in a simulating environment, 3 hours, not even 3 hours, 1 minute, and try to write 2 exams per day. That will help.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. All right. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Ashna.
Thank you so much.
And thank you all of you for coming. And थोड़ा फीमेल काउंट बढ़ाओ यार, मतलब 15 से भी कम लड़कियां हैं हमारे पास.
Alright.
टॉपर्स तो कहाँ से निकलेंगे फिर? टॉप 10 में है ना, क्वालिटी नहीं है, क्वांटिटी तो नहीं है. क्वालिटी है, क्वांटिटी तो नहीं है हमारे पास. अभी क्लास में हमारे पास 15 लड़कियां भी नहीं बैठी हैं. ओके, कीपिंग दैट अपार्ट, and I hope it was motivating enough. Okay, so let's have a huge round of applause for Ashna.